In this video, we'll be walking through how to play Godori Hwatu. Hwatu has been the most popular card game in South Korea for over 50 years. Traditionally, the game is often played by families over the holidays, sometimes with a light form of a gambling aspect. In this renewed version of Hwatu, we've added some additional variations and scoring rules to make this game more suitable for board gamers and families. Once you open up the game box, there will be one paper deck and one plastic deck. For each game that you play, you can choose to either use the paper or plastic deck. The plastic deck is what is traditionally played in Korea, but our game offers you the option of using either one. You will also see 6 player aid cards, 2 for each player, 3 scorecards, 15 flower score tokens, and 10 wooden victory tiles. The goal of Godori Hwatu is simple. The player with the most victory points by the end of the game is the winner. Players will capture cards and earn points, which are the flower tokens. Players can then buy victory tiles using these flower tokens and compete to be the winner. To set up the game, choose one of the 6 scorecards that are available. Each scorecard can vary in game length and difficulty, so for your first game, scorecard number 1 is recommended. Arrange the number of victory tiles that will be used for the game as indicated inside the bracket at the center of the card. So for this game, we would use 4 green victory tiles, 3 red victory tiles, and 1 black victory tile. As we can see here, each of the plastic and paper decks contain 48 Hwatu cards as well as the 2 lucky cards. The 48 cards are made up of 12 suits, each suit essentially representing a month of the year from January to December. As seen in the rulebook, each month contains 4 cards. Each of the cards can also be grouped into 4 categories. We have the lights, animals, ribbons, and junk cards. These are all shown in the rulebook as well as on the player aid cards. The scorecard is what shows how a player can obtain victory points throughout the game. According to scorecard number 1, it shows that each green victory tile that a player obtains throughout the game is worth 2 points. Similarly, each red tile is worth 5 points, and each black tile is worth 7 points. As well, if a player obtains 1 green, 1 red, and 1 black victory tile, this will be worth an additional 2 points. And as well, if a player obtains all 3 green tiles, this will be worth an additional 5 points. And if a player completes what is called 7 animals, this will be an additional 7 points awarded immediately and the player wins the round. More on this will be explained a bit later in the video. All of these points, except the 7 animals or any that have the lightning symbol, will be calculated at the end of the game. Now we move on to setting up the cards. For a 2-player game, you will not be using the 2 lucky cards. The lucky cards should only be used for 3+ player games. At any given time, this game can only be played by 3 players maximum. So when you have 4 players, you must do a variant called card selling, which will be explained a bit later in this video. I will be demonstrating the following for a 3-player game. So first, select a dealer who will be responsible for shuffling the deck and handling the cards. After shuffling, the player to the dealer's left will be asked to cut the deck in half and place it face down in the center of the table. The dealer will then deal 4 cards to each player in a counterclockwise direction. Then deal 3 cards faced up in the central layout area. Continue dealing 3 more cards to each player. Any cards left over can be placed on the table deck, or if you run out of cards while dealing, you can just take some from the table deck. Each of the players can now look at their cards. Usually, the gameplay can now start, but there are a few special conditions immediately after dealing that may need to be addressed. The first condition is if a player gets dealt 4 cards of the same month, such as the one here, they will win the game immediately and collect 3 points, or in this case 3 flower tokens. The second condition is if a player gets dealt 3 cards of the same month in their hand, they have the option to play special rules called Bomb or Shake It in their future turns. More on these special rules will be explained a bit later in the video. The third condition is if there are 4 cards of the same month In the central layout setup, such as the one here, all of the cards must be reshuffled and dealt again. And lastly, if there are 3 cards of the same month in the central layout setup, you can stack these cards into a pile, which is now called a stacker. More on this will be explained a bit later in the video. Now we can get into the gameplay. Each turn is very simple. You have 2 chances to capture cards in the central layout. First, you play a card from your hand. Then, you play a card from the table deck. When capturing a card in the central layout, the card that you play has to match the month of the card that is captured. So for example, if I want to capture this card here, then I must play a card from my hand that matches the same month. So in this case, I would just play this one here. To capture the card, simply just place your card right on top. Or if you want to make things a bit more exciting, the way we traditionally play it in Korea is you're supposed to slap it and stick it right on top, like this. Now I play a card from the table deck. So I simply take the top card and I flip it over and do the same thing. I try to capture the next card that matches the same month. In this case, it matches that card over there. Now that I've captured all 4 of these cards, I can bring them and move them to the area in front of me, which is the capture area, and this is where I'm going to keep all of my captured cards throughout the game. You can arrange your cards by type, so I'll place my junk cards on the right side here. The animal cards, I'll place them on the top. The ribbon cards, I'll place them on the bottom, and then this is another junk card, so I'll keep them here. If at any time a card that I play from my hand or from the table deck doesn't match a card in the central layout, then I just place it on its own. So for example, none of the cards in my hand right now match the cards in the central layout. So all I do is just place one of my cards in the central layout on its own, and then I continue playing a card from the deck to see if I can capture anything. And it looks like this one doesn't have any matches either, so all I do is I just place it down, and that is the end of my turn. The game will continue like this until one of the players has collected sufficient points to either call go or stop. For 2-player games, you must reach 5 points, and for 3-player games, you must reach 3 points. Before we explain what go and stop means, let's take a look at the special hands. The special hands refer to the number of points you can get from capturing different groups of cards. Each of the junk, ribbons, animals, and light cards are scored differently. Starting off with the junk cards, the first 10 junk cards you capture is worth 1 point, and every additional junk card after the 10th is also worth 1 point. So for example, if this is your capture area, and you capture 12 junk cards, the 10 here would be worth 1 point, then 2, 3. So this would be a total of 3 points. Keep in mind that there are some junk cards that have a 2 on the top corner, indicating that these are double value junk cards. So capturing one of these counts as having 2 junk cards. As well, keep in mind about the junk's winning bonus, which is if the winning player's final points contain junk cards, that player will get an additional 2 points for every other player who has 4 or less junk cards. Next, we have the ribbon cards. The first 5 ribbon cards that you capture, regardless of the color, is worth 1 point, and every additional ribbon card is worth 1 point. As well, if you capture all 3 ribbons of a given color, so for example, if you were to have 3 red ribbons, or 3 greens, or 3 blues, this is worth 3 points. Next, we have the animal cards. Again, the first 5 animal cards is worth 1 point, and every additional animal card afterwards is worth 1 point. Then we have something called Godori, which is when a player captures the 3 bird cards in February, April, and August. Capturing these 3 cards is worth 5 points. Lastly, we have the light cards. If you capture 3 light cards, but one of them is a December lights, which is this card here, this is worth 2 points. However, if you capture 3 light cards that do not include the December lights, this is worth 3 points. If you capture any 4 light cards, this is worth 4 points. And lastly, if you happen to capture all 5 light cards, this is worth 15 points. Keep in mind about the lights winning bonus, which is if the winner's final points include 2 or more points coming from their light cards, they will receive an additional 2 points for every other player who does not have any captured light cards. The last type of cards are the lucky cards. As indicated by the 2 and the 3, they are worth either 2 or 3 junk cards. When playing a lucky card, there are 3 instances. If you start by getting dealt a lucky card in your hand, you may play the card on any of your turns before doing your normal turn. To play, just show everyone that you have a lucky card and place it in your capture area. Then just draw another card from the table deck to your hand to replace it. Another case is if the game begins with a lucky card that is dealt to the central layout, the dealer gets to take the lucky card and place it in their capture area. Then just flip a card from the table deck to replace it. Lastly, if a player flips over a lucky card from the table deck during gameplay, the player will immediately claim the lucky card and place it in their capture area. Continue the game by flipping over a second card from the table deck. Now that we've understood the special hands, let's talk about calling go and stop. As mentioned before, as soon as a player has reached sufficient points, they have the option to either call go or stop. When a player calls stop and stops the game, they are the winner of that round. The winner collects the flower tokens equivalent to the number of points they obtained during that round. If they have enough flower tokens, they can choose to either immediately buy victory tiles or save them up, especially if they don't have enough tokens to buy a tile. When the player calls go, the game continues on to the next player. However, calling go can be risky because in order to call stop or a second go on their subsequent turns, they must have increased their previous score in the capture area by at least 1 point. There is the risk of another player reaching the sufficient points threshold before their turn returns, and another player may call stop and win the round. In this case, that winner will receive an extra 2 points if another player had called go that round. So although there is a risk to calling go, if you do end up winning that round, you will get an additional 1 point for each go that you call. We've covered most of the playing rules so far. Now we just have a few special events that may occur during the gameplay. First, we have what is called a steal rule. When a steal rule is played, all other players must give up a junk card of their choice from their respective capture areas to this player. So essentially, they steal a junk card and places it in their own capture area. The steal rule is played when the following 5 events occur. The first event is called bomb. Bomb is when a player plays 3 cards of the same month from their hand to capture a card in the central layout. So for example, if I play 3 of these cards from my hand to capture the 4th card in the central layout, all other players must give up one of their captured junk cards and I get to place it in my captured area, and this is called the steal rule. Then I continue my turn as usual and I play the table deck. Keep in mind that bombing 3 cards at once makes your hand 2 cards fewer than everyone else. So to compensate for this, you must only play the table deck and not from your hand for any 2 turns after bombing. These 2 turns do not have to be immediately after. Next, we have something called cleanup. Cleanup is when the last 2 cards in a central layout are captured by a player during a single turn, leaving the area empty. So for example, if this is my hand right now, I can play this card to capture this card here, then play a card from the table deck, which captures this one here. And I get to take all 4 of these cards to my captured area. When this happens, again, the steal rule is played and everyone else must give up one of their captured junk cards. Then we have something called same month cleanup, which is very similar to cleanup, except when the last 2 cards of the central layout are of the same month, and they are captured by a player during a single turn. So for example, if this is my hand right now, I can play this card here from my hand to capture this card. Then I play a card from the table deck as usual, and this captures the last card there. When this happens, Cleanup is also played at the same time since there are no remaining cards on the central layout. So the steal rule can actually be played twice and they can steal 2 junk cards from each player. The next event is called Ghost. When a player does not have any cards in their hand that matches the central layout, remember that you can just play any one of your cards by placing it in the central layout. So in this case, none of my cards match the central layout, so I'm just going to choose one and place it here. Then, as usual, your turn will continue and you play a card from the table deck. So Ghost is when this card matches the card that you just played from your hand, and you capture both cards in a single turn. Again, the steal rule will be played. The last event is called 3 cards capture. This is when a player captures a stacker or a pile of 3 cards, either by playing a card from their hand or from the table deck. In this case, I take a look at my hand and it looks like I can play this card to capture the stacker. Again, the steal rule will be played. Now that we've mentioned stacker a couple times now, just to show you how that can happen, stacker is when you play a card from your hand to capture a card in the central layout. So in this case, I'm going to play this card here to capture this card in the central layout. Then, as usual, you would play a card from the deck. And when this card matches the card that you just captured, this creates a pile of 3 cards. This is now called a stacker, and you cannot capture these cards anymore, at least not during your current turn. The stacker remains on the table until you or another player plays the 4th card in that month to capture it in a future turn. Keep in mind that a player will immediately win the round if they happen to create 3 stackers in a single round. Finally, the last special event is called Shake It, which was briefly mentioned during setup. When you start by having 3 cards of the same month in your dealt hand, you can call Shake It, which allows you to receive double the number of points if you end up winning the round. Before you call Shake It, just make sure that the 4th card of the month is not currently sitting in the central layout, which in this case it is not. Then simply show everyone else that you have the 3 cards in your hand, and then place one of the 3 cards into the central layout. You don't have to call Shake It right after dealing. You can choose to call it whenever throughout the game, but obviously you must call it before the round ends and someone calls stop. To sum everything up, you capture cards until a player reaches the sufficient number of points to call stop and win the round. Make sure that as you're playing, you keep track of the number of points you have by referring to the special hand summary on the player aid card. If all of the cards in everyone's hands have been played and none of the players have reached the sufficient number of points to call stop, this leaves us a game without a winner, and this is called a draw. The cards are then reshuffled by the same dealer and played another round. The winner of the new round will receive 2 additional points. As mentioned before, although Godori Hwatu can be played by up to 4 or 5 players, there can only be maximum 3 players in a given round. This is a variant called card selling. For a 4 or 5 player game, deal the cards in the same way as you would for a 3-player game. However, make sure that the central layout is faced down until the 3 players who will be participating have been decided. To determine the 3 players, the dealer must always participate. Starting with the player to the dealer's right, they must decide whether to play or drop out of the round. The players who choose to drop out must sell any of their lights, double junk cards, and lucky cards in their dealt hand. In exchange, they receive 1 flower token per card sold. Immediately after selling, they may buy victory tiles if they are able to. Then reshuffle the dropped out players' cards back into the table deck and begin the game. On the scoring cards, the instant victory tile bonuses will be indicated with a lightning symbol. Upon completing one of them, the player immediately wins the round. There are 3 different instant victory tile bonuses, which are 7 animals, Godori match, and 5 lights. 7 animals is when you capture 7 different animals. This combination must be made up of your captured cards, as well as at least 1 victory tile that you bought from previous rounds, which are the red and green tiles. Upon completing 7 animals, you immediately win the round and receive the number of points as indicated on the scorecard. In this case, the scorecard indicates that 7 animals is 4 points. Note that lucky cards can also be used as 7 animals. So for example, let's say this is my captured area and these are the victory tiles that I have obtained so far in the game. I have 5 animal cards here as well as my lucky card, which is 6 animals. And then I combine this with one of my animal tiles that I bought from a previous round, which equals to 7 animals in total. Just make sure to check that they are actually 7 different animals, so there should be no overlap. In this case, I would become the winner of this round immediately, winning 4 points as indicated on the scorecard. 5 lights is when you capture 5 different lights. Similarly, this combination must be made up of your captured cards as well as at least 1 light victory tile, which are the black tiles. Upon completing 5 lights, you immediately win the round and you receive the number of points as indicated on the scorecard. In this case, 5 lights corresponds to 5 points, or 5 flower tokens. As well, make sure that all of your lights are different lights, so there should be no overlap. Godori match is when you capture the 3 Godori birds. Again, this combination must be made up of your captured Godori cards and at least 1 Godori victory tile, which are the 3 tiles that have the Godori birds on it. So in this case, I have my Godori tile that I bought from a previous round, as well as the 2 Godori cards that I've obtained in this current round. Upon completion, you immediately win the round and receive the number of points as indicated on the scorecard, and in this case, Godori match is worth 5 points. As well, make sure to check that your combination contains all 3 Godori birds, so you cannot have 2 of the same birds. The game ends when all victory tiles have been claimed. Each player can then add up their victory points and flower score tokens, and the player with the most points win the game. In the case of a tie, the player with the most number of a higher value tile wins the game. So for example, a player with 1 black victory tile would be the winner between a tie with another player who does not have a black tile. So that brings us to the end of this video. We hope this was helpful alongside the rulebook, and if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to hear from you.